I'm Emily Carter, a 32-year-old woman whose entire world crumbled on a rain-soaked afternoon in Seattle, where the sky seemed to weep alongside my breaking heart. The air inside Carter's diner carried the comforting aroma of Dad's secret BBQ ribs sizzling on the grill and Mom's legendary apple pie cooling on the counter, a bittersweet reminder of the legacy I'd fought to preserve. For 5 years since my parents passed away, Dad from a sudden heart attack and Mom from a stroke that stole her slowly, I'd poured every ounce of myself into this small eatery on Pike Street. It was more than a business. It was a sanctuary, a place where I could still hear Dad's booming laugh as he flipped burgers and feel Mom's gentle touch as she taught me to crimp pie crusts. I transformed it from a struggling hole in the wall into a beloved local haunt, its walls adorned with black and white photos of smiling customers and handwritten notes thanking me for keeping the Carter family spirit alive. I was wiping down the counter, chatting with Mr. Henderson, our oldest regular, about his granddaughter's upcoming ballet recital when the bell above the door clanged with a harsh, jarring ring. In strode my brother Jake, his polished loafers leaving wet streaks on the hardwood floor, his tailored suit a jarring contrast to the diner's warm, rustic charm. His face was a mask of arrogance, his lips curled into a smirk that sent a shiver down my spine. Jake had always been the golden child. UCLA business degree, corporate hotshot in Portland, the son my parents boasted about at every family gathering while I stayed behind. The practical daughter who cared for them in their final years. He hadn't set foot in the diner in 5 years, sending occasional checks as if they could absolve his absence, while I worked 14-hour days to keep this place alive. Now, here he was, his presence an ominous storm cloud over my sanctuary. "Emily, it's time to hand over the diner," he declared, his voice dripping with entitlement as he leaned against the counter, ignoring the warmth of the space around him. "I'm the eldest son. It's my birthright. You're just a woman who'll marry off someday and leave this behind. Why cling to it?" The words hit me like a physical blow, my hand trembling as the rag I'd been holding slipped to the floor. I stood frozen, my heart hammering in my chest, unable to process the audacity of his demand. This diner wasn't just a building. It was my blood, my sweat, the echo of my parents' love. I'd spent countless nights perfecting Dad's BBQ recipe, sourcing organic ingredients from local farmers, training staff to treat every customer like family. I'd turned Carter's Diner into a thriving spot, its reputation drawing foodies from across Washington state, all while Jake chased his corporate dreams, never once offering to help. "You can't be serious," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rain tapping against the windows, shock stealing my breath. Jake's eyes narrowed, his smirk fading into a cold, calculating glare. "I'm dead serious," he replied, his tone sharp as a blade. "I've got a lawyer, and I'll sue you if you don't sign it over. Dad told me before he died that this place was meant for me." The lie stung like a slap across my face. Dad had never said such a thing. I knew the will named me as the sole heir, a document I'd clutched through tear-filled nights after Mom's funeral, a promise that this diner was mine to carry forward. But Jake's threat hung heavy in the air, a dark promise of legal battles I couldn't afford. Mr. Henderson, overhearing the exchange, muttered a gruff, "Unbelievable," under his breath, and shuffled out into the rain, leaving me alone with my brother's betrayal. I felt a surge of fury, but fear gnawed at my insides. Jake had the money, the connections, the ruthless ambition to make this fight ugly. He'd always been the favored child, the one Mom bragged about at church while I quietly cared for her through her illness, the one Dad praised for his grades while I learned to balance the diner's books at 16. I'd sacrificed my own dreams, college, travel, a life beyond these walls, to keep our family together, and now Jake was here to rip it all away. "I need time to think," I managed to say, my voice shaking as I grabbed my coat and fled into the storm, the rain mixing with the tears I refused to let fall in front of him. My mind raced as I walked the wet streets of Seattle, the city's gray skyline a mirror to my despair. I couldn't lose the diner. It was the last piece of my parents I had left, the only place where I still felt their presence. But Jake's words echoed in my head, a cruel reminder of how little he valued me, how little he cared for the legacy I'd fought to protect. As I ducked into a small coffee shop to escape the rain, my phone buzzed with a text from an old friend, Sarah, who'd heard through the grapevine about Jake's return. "Heard Jake's back in town. Be careful. He's been asking around about the diner's value," she wrote. My stomach twisted as I realized this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment demand. Jake had been planning this, plotting to take what I'd built with my own hands. I ordered a black coffee, the bitter taste mirroring my mood, and sat by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. I thought of the countless mornings I'd spent perfecting Mom's pie recipe, the late nights scrubbing the diner's kitchen until it gleamed, the joy of seeing a child's face light up when I handed them a free cookie on their birthday. Carter's Diner was my heart, my home, and Jake wanted to tear it from me without a shred of remorse. But as the rain slowed to a drizzle, a fire sparked within me. I wouldn't let him win. I'd fight, not just for the diner, but for the dignity he'd tried to strip away. Little did he know, I was about to uncover secrets that would turn his arrogance into ashes. Part 2, Conflict, 1,050 words. The weeks following Jake's bombshell were a descent into a nightmare I couldn't wake from, a relentless storm of doubt, betrayal, and whispered threats that haunted my every step. I returned to the diner the next morning, the familiar creak of the floorboards under my feet, a small comfort amidst the chaos in my mind. The air still carried the faint scent of last night's BBQ, but the warmth I'd always felt here was overshadowed by Jake's cruel words. I couldn't focus. Every clink of a coffee mug, every laugh from a customer, felt like a reminder of what I stood to lose. I pulled out the diner's ledger, trying to distract myself with numbers, but my hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, the weight of Jake's threat pressing down on me like a physical force. I knew I had to act, but I felt woefully unprepared. Jake wasn't just my brother. He was a corporate shark, a man who'd climbed the ranks in Portland's tech scene, with a ruthless ambition that left no room for sentiment. He'd always been the favored child, the one Mom bragged about at church suppers, while I quietly cared for her through her final months, the one Dad praised for his academic achievements while I learned to balance the diner's books at 16 to keep us afloat. I'd sacrificed my own dreams, college, travel, a life beyond these walls, to care for our parents, to keep our family together. After they passed, I found solace in the diner, turning it into a thriving business with a loyal following. The walls were lined with photos of happy customers, their smiles captured in black and white, and handwritten notes thanking me for keeping the Carter family spirit alive. I'd worked 14-hour days, sourcing organic ingredients from local farmers, training staff to treat every customer like family, and perfecting recipes that drew foodies from across Washington state. But Jake? He'd sent money now and then, a guilt offering, never once stepping foot inside until now, and his sudden return felt like a predator circling its prey. I dug through old files in the diner's tiny office, pulling out the will Mom and Dad had left behind. It was clear as day. I was the sole heir to Carter's Diner, a decision they'd made, because they knew I'd loved this place with every fiber of my being. But Jake's forged document, which he'd waved in my face during his visit, claimed Dad intended the diner for him, a blatant lie that twisted the knife deeper. I needed proof, something to counter his claims, but I also needed to understand why he was doing this. I called Sarah, my childhood friend who now worked as a paralegal, and poured out the story over a shaky phone call. Jake's been asking around about the diner's property value, she confirmed, her voice tight with concern. He's been meeting with some shady real estate guys. I think he wants to sell it, Emily. My stomach churned at the thought. Sell the diner? The place where Dad taught me to grill ribs? Where Mom's laughter still echoed in my memories? It was unthinkable. Determined to fight, I hired Frank, a gruff ex-cop turned private investigator who'd helped a friend track down a cheating spouse. Frank was a no-nonsense man with a penchant for digging up dirt, and I hoped he could uncover something to stop Jake. "This brother of yours sounds like a real piece of work," Frank grumbled as he flipped through the forged document I'd given him. Over the next few days, he unearthed a tangled web of deceit that left me reeling. Jake had bribed a notary to falsify the document, paid off a witness to claim Dad had changed his mind on his deathbed, and had already met with a real estate developer eager to buy the diner's prime location on Pike Street. The developer, a slick man named Victor Grayson, wanted to tear down the diner and build a luxury condo complex, a deal that would net Jake millions. Frank also found text messages Jake had sent to a friend, mocking me with a cruelty that cut deep. "Emily's the family charity case. She'll sign it over without a fight. This diner's worth a fortune, and I'm not letting her ruin my plans." The betrayal was a knife to my heart, but it also ignited a fire within me. I couldn't let Jake destroy our parents' legacy, not after everything I'd sacrificed. But there was more. Frank uncovered a shocking secret that added fuel to my rage. Jake had a hidden fiancée, Patricia Langston, a wealthy investor whose family owned half of downtown Seattle. She was funding his takeover, believing his lie that I'd abandoned the diner and that he was its rightful heir. Patricia had no idea about his deceit, and the revelation turned my anger into a burning resolve. Jake wasn't just betraying me, he was using her too, playing a dangerous game with a woman whose influence could make or break him. I realized then that a courtroom battle wouldn't be enough. I wanted Jake to feel the humiliation he'd inflicted on me, to see his carefully constructed world crumble in front of everyone he'd tried to impress. While Jake planned his grand reopening, transforming the diner into a sleek, modern space with no trace of its soul, I worked in the shadows. I took on side gigs, catering private events, selling Mom's pie recipes online, even teaching cooking classes at a community center, saving every penny to fund my plan. I amassed $30,000, a small fortune that I poured into hiring Frank, consulting with a lawyer, and crafting a strategy to turn Jake's victory into his downfall. I studied auction laws, networked with local business owners, and even befriended a tech-savvy barista named Mia, who helped me hack into Jake's social media, where I found more incriminating posts. He'd been bragging about his new empire, while calling me a pathetic dreamer who'd never fight back. The grand reopening was set for a Saturday night, and Jake had invited food critics, investors, and Seattle's elite, turning it into a spectacle of his supposed triumph. But I'd be there, not to beg, but to unleash a storm of revenge that would leave him in ruins. Part 3, Climax, 1,250 words. The night of the grand reopening arrived, and the transformed Carter's Diner on Pike Street glowed with an artificial elegance that felt like a betrayal of everything it once stood for. String lights draped across the ceiling cast a sterile shimmer, A live jazz band played smooth melodies in the corner, and the rustic wooden tables I'd cherished were replaced with cold marble slabs. Jake had erased every trace of our parents' legacy. Mom's handwritten sign was gone. Dad's BBQ ribs were off the menu, and a flashy new logo mocked the cozy charm I'd nurtured. The space was packed with 150 guests, food critics from the Seattle Times, investors with deep pockets, socialites sipping champagne, and even a few local celebrities posing for photos. I stood in the shadows at the back, my pulse a frantic drumbeat, my sharp black dress a stark contrast to the glittering crowd. In my hand, I clutched a folder of evidence, and in my pocket, a USB drive burned with the truth that would shatter Jake's world. Jake took the stage, his suit impeccable, his smile a mask of confidence as he raised a glass to the crowd. "Welcome to Carter's new legacy," he proclaimed, his voice smooth as silk, dripping with self-assured triumph. "I've revitalized my family's heritage into a modern dining experience, a vision my parents would be proud of. This is just the beginning of a culinary empire." Applause erupted, cameras flashed, and the crowd toasted to his supposed brilliance. I watched, my stomach churning with a mix of rage and anticipation, as he basked in their adoration. He'd turned the diner into something unrecognizable, a soulless shell of what it had been, all to impress these strangers who knew nothing of the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd poured into every inch of this place. But I wasn't here to mourn. I was here to destroy his illusion, to make him feel the weight of his betrayal in front of everyone he'd tried to impress. When Jake opened the floor for questions, I stepped forward, the room's chatter dying into a tense hush as all eyes turned to me. "I'm Emily Carter, the true owner of this diner," I declared, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Jake's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic, his eyes darting to the exits as if he could escape what was coming. "This is my proof," I said, handing the folder to a critic from Eater, Seattle, and plugging the USB into the projector. The screen flared to life, displaying the will that named me as the sole heir, the lease agreement in my name, and a recording of Jake's voice that sent a shockwave through the room. "Emily's too weak to fight back. I'll sell this place for millions and leave her with nothing." Gasps rippled through the crowd, whispers turning into a roar of disbelief. The critic shouted, "This is a scandal!" and the room erupted in chaos as guests pulled out their phones, investors whispered heatedly, and socialites exchanged scandalized glances. Jake stammered, his face pale, trying to salvage the moment with a shaky laugh. "This is a misunderstanding. Emily's confused. She doesn't understand business," he said, his voice cracking under the weight of his lies. But before he could spin another tale, Frank, my gruff investigator, emerged from the back, flanked by 2 police officers whose presence sent a jolt through the crowd. "Jacob Carter, you're under investigation for forgery and fraud," Frank announced, his voice booming as the handcuffs glinted under the lights. The officers moved toward Jake, who stumbled back, his glass of champagne slipping from his hand and shattering on the stage. The crowd's outrage grew louder. Investors bolted for the exits, and Jake's face twisted with a mix of rage and disbelief as the cuffs clicked around his wrists. But the real bombshell was yet to come. Patricia Langston, a stunning woman in an emerald gown, stepped forward from the front row, tears streaming down her face as she clutched her purse. "Jake, you told me this was your idea," she cried, her voice breaking with betrayal. "You said Emily abandoned the diner. That's why I funded this." The crowd gasped as Patricia revealed their engagement, a secret Jake had kept even from me. "You lied to me too," she screamed, tearing off her engagement ring and hurling it at him, the diamond glittering as it bounced off the stage. The revelation doubled the betrayal. Not only had Jake stolen from me, but he'd used Patricia's wealth to bankroll his scheme, playing her as ruthlessly as he'd played me. Just when I thought the chaos couldn't escalate further, a woman in a red dress stood up from the audience, her icy tone cutting through the din. "I'm Lisa, Jake's ex-girlfriend," she announced, holding up a stack of photos. "He cheated on me with Patricia while planning this scam. I have proof." She tossed the images onto the stage, pictures of Jake with both women, taken during supposed business trips to luxury resorts, his arms around them while he smiled for the camera. The crowd's reaction was explosive, a mix of gasps and shouts as the photos scattered across the stage, each one a nail in Jake's coffin. Socialites whispered furiously, critics scribbled notes, and investors who'd lingered now fled in droves, their trust in Jake shattered. The betrayal wasn't just against me. It was a web of deceit that ensnared everyone around him, a house of cards collapsing in spectacular fashion. Part 4, Conclusion, 1,050 words. The fallout from that night was a whirlwind that swept through Seattle like a wildfire, leaving Jake's carefully constructed world in ashes. The police escorted him out of the diner in handcuffs, his head bowed as camera flashes illuminated his shame, while the crowd's outrage followed him into the night. I stood on the stage, the folder of evidence still in my hand, watching the chaos unfold with a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The guests who remained, mostly critics and a few loyal locals, approached me with words of support, their voices a blur as I tried to process what had just happened. Patricia, her face streaked with mascara, grabbed my arm before leaving, her voice trembling. "I had no idea, Emily. I'm so sorry," she whispered, her eyes filled with regret. I nodded, too overwhelmed to respond as she hurried out into the rain, her emerald gown a stark contrast to the gray night. Lisa, the ex-girlfriend who dropped the final bombshell, lingered a moment longer, her expression a mix of vindication and sorrow. "I thought I was the only one he hurt," she said, handing me a USB drive with more photos and messages. "Make sure he pays for this." I took the drive, my resolve hardening. She'd given me another weapon, one I'd use to ensure Jake faced the full consequences of his actions. The next day, the Seattle Times ran a front-page story titled, "The Diner Heist, Brother's Betrayal Exposed at Grand Opening," detailing Jake's forgery, his double life, and the dramatic scene that unfolded. The article went viral, shared across social media with hashtags like OSHA Diner Justice and OSH Seattle Scandal, turning Carter's Diner into a sensation overnight. Lines stretched down Pike Street as people flocked to support the sister who fought back, their curiosity piqued by the drama and their hearts touched by my story. The court case that followed was swift and merciless. With the evidence I'd gathered, Frank's findings, Lisa's photos, and the recording of Jake's own words, the judge ruled in my favor, awarding me 100% ownership of the diner and ordering Jake to pay damages for his theft. He was fined heavily for fraud and forgery. His corporate career in Portland crumbled as his employer severed ties, and Patricia's family disowned her for her unwitting role, their investment firm collapsing under the scandal. Jake's reputation was beyond repair. Once a rising star, he was now a pariah, his name synonymous with deceit. Patricia, humiliated by the revelation of Jake's infidelity, broke off their engagement and moved to San Francisco, her social standing in Seattle irreparably damaged. Lisa's photos, which showed Jake's betrayal of both women, became the final nail in his coffin, ensuring he had nowhere to hide. I poured my heart into restoring the diner, peeling away Jake's soulless renovations to bring back its soul. I reinstalled the wooden tables, hung Mom's handwritten sign above the door, and brought back Dad's BBQ ribs and Mom's apple pie, their flavors a balm to my wounded spirit. I added a free meal program for struggling families, a tribute to my parents' generosity that Jake had never understood, and watched as the diner thrived once more. The community rallied around me, their support a lifeline in the aftermath of the storm. Regulars like Mr. Henderson returned, bringing their families, and new customers arrived in droves, eager to taste the food and hear the story of the diner heist. I hired a young cook, Sarah, who reminded me of myself at 20, determined, passionate, and a little lost, mentoring her as she learned the recipes that had kept our family alive. Months later, Jake appeared at the diner, his once polished appearance replaced by a disheveled mess. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow, and his voice cracked as he spoke. "I was blinded by greed, Emily. I'm so sorry," he mumbled, his hands fidgeting nervously. I looked at him, feeling no triumph, only a quiet pity. "You had your chance to be a brother," I said softly, my voice steady. "Now build your own life." I didn't need his apology. I'd found my strength in the fight, in the community that had lifted me up, in the legacy I'd reclaimed. I turned back to the counter where Sarah was rolling out dough for a new batch of pies, and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Jake shuffled out into the rain, a broken man, while I stood tall, the diner's warmth wrapping around me like a hug from my parents. But the biggest surprise came a few weeks later, when a lawyer contacted me about a safe deposit box my father had left behind. I met him at a bank downtown, my heart pounding as he handed me a key and a note in Dad's handwriting. "To Emily, my rock, keep the diner alive." Inside the box were stocks worth $500,000, a final gift from my parents that secured my future. Tears streamed down my face as I realized they'd believed in me all along, even when I doubted myself. With the money, I opened a second location in Tacoma, expanding the diner's legacy while keeping its heart intact. I named the new spot Carter's Haven, a place where anyone could find a warm meal and a listening ear, a testament to the love my parents had instilled in me. One evening, as I locked up the original diner, a letter arrived from Patricia. She'd moved to San Francisco, started over, and wanted to atone for her role by offering a partnership to expand the diner chain nationwide. "You showed me what real strength looks like," she wrote. I smiled, tucking the letter into my pocket, and stepped out into the Seattle night. The rain a gentle mist now. Life, it seemed, had a way of balancing the scales, and I'd found my place in it, not through revenge, but through resilience, love, and the unbreakable bond with the family I'd built, both in blood and in spirit. Have you ever been betrayed by a sibling or loved one? Share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of drama and justice on this channel.